Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone online as well. I'm going to move into this next topic, practicing in the world of the unknowing, relationships with non-practitioners. You know, sometimes when people are learning these teachings, they think it's really great to sit around and learn about being more loving and kind and compassionate and polite and respectful to people. But they think like, what about all those other people out there that aren't learning? You know, how am I going to deal with these situations where other people are being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful to me while I'm trying to be loving and kind to them? So that's what this topic is going to help you to be able to understand. So this topic of practicing in the world of the unknowing relationships with non-practitioners, first, you need to understand what is a non-practitioner. This is someone who's not actively learning and practicing the path to enlightenment as taught by the Buddha. The Buddha referred to these individuals as untrained worldlings. If you read his teachings, that's the phrase that he uses. He calls them untrained worldlings because the mind is untrained and the mind is holding on to the world, wanting the world to be a certain way. It's important not to develop this us versus them mentality. Sometimes when people are talking about these kinds of topics, it's kind of like us versus them. And it almost becomes this conflict and this contention. And it could even include the ego, where someone's putting themselves above others and thinking that other people are below us. And it's important to understand that that's not what this is. This is to understand that a non-practitioner is going to think about the world very differently than a practitioner, someone who's learned and practiced these teachings. For example, if you've learned the Four Noble Truths, which is you understand that your mind is causing these discontent feelings, other people aren't going to necessarily know that. They're not going to know that their mind is causing their own anger and frustration. So you can be involved in a conversation with someone like a parent or a life partner or a child, maybe a coworker or a boss, and they're trying to adamantly convince you that you are making them angry, and you know that that's not the case. So they're not going to understand things like discontentedness and the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. They're not going to understand craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning. They're not going to understand that continued struggle that they experience because of their own mind. They're going to attribute the difficulties and struggles that they experience to the outside world and thinking that it's other people that are causing them to struggle in the world. They're going to most likely have what the Buddha refers to as wrong view, where they're not going to understand that it's their own mind that's causing these feelings. They're going to blame other people. And when they're blaming their discontentedness on other people, you might be one of the people that they blame their discontentedness on. And because of that, people might push you aside. People might be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or people might put their expectations on you. And you need to be able to spot that for what it is. An individual who's not practicing these teachings is most likely not going to understand what is true love. They're not going to understand how to love without expectations, how to love unconditionally. And this can be a real struggle, because if you're learning these kinds of things, you can be in conversations like, say you go on a business trip and you call back to your partner and you say, hey, how's it going, honey? How's your day? And they're like, oh, I miss you so much. I really miss you. Why did you leave? Like, it's so miserable here without you. Do you miss me? And if you're like, no, I didn't, I'm not missing you, they're going to maybe take that and interpret it in a way that isn't really true, right? They might interpret that you don't miss them as you don't love them. Because if they're thinking about that missing you as being the love, not realizing that that's the attachment, they could think just because you say, I don't miss you, that you don't love them. But that's the craving, desire, attachment. It's not the love. So if they're not understanding what is true love, oftentimes you can find that this person is putting their expectations on you and trying to control you and get you to function a certain way where you're not doing that. So being in a relationship with a non-practitioner can be quite challenging. They might not actively be cultivating their mind to cultivate wholesome qualities and eliminate unwholesome qualities. So while you're working to eliminate your anger and your frustration and cultivate things like loving kindness and compassion and things like this, they might not be doing that. Not just a life partner, but maybe your boss or your mom or your dad or your brothers or your sisters. So a non-practitioner is going to be struggling in the world in a way that a practitioner is not. More and more, you're going to see that you're becoming more and more peaceful, more and more joyful, and the people around you are not. They're becoming maybe more angry and more frustrated. So this is the individual who is not practicing the teachings. And it's very important that we don't take this us versus them mentality, but just understand that they're coming from a different frame of reference, a different point of view. They're just thinking about the world in a different way than you might be thinking about the world. So now that you understand what that is, I'm going to share with you some difficulties and struggles that an individual experiences when they're around someone who's not practicing the teachings. So with you knowing the teachings and observing non-practitioners struggling, but yet that person might be uninterested to learn and practice the teachings that lead to enlightenment. This can be a real challenge for you because you know exactly what they're struggling with. You know exactly what the problem is. You know that they're having craving, desire, attachment, and you see them having painful feelings, and you might actually be having painful feelings because you see them struggling. This is because of your attachment, right? So if you want mom and dad to be peaceful and joyful, and you are becoming more peaceful and joyful, and they're not, you could actually be struggling. Or if you have a life partner where they're becoming more and more discontent, they're becoming more and more they're having more and more suffering, they're having painful feelings. You might actually experience painful feelings when you see them struggling. That's because of your attachment to that person. So you need to get to the point where you eliminate any attachment that you have to that person or an attachment to helping that person. It doesn't mean that you don't help somebody. It means that you eliminate your attachment to help them. So going back to that example with my wife with the cups, we didn't have a craving, desire, attachment to help my wife. We weren't longing, yearning to help her. We just chose to help her, right? And if she chose not to learn and not to let go of that expectation, that was her choice. So we didn't have a craving or desire, this longing and yearning for her to be a certain way. But as a supportive, caring individuals, we did something that allowed her to be able to do that, right? So you need to eliminate an attachment or a craving to help people. But that doesn't mean that you don't help people. It means that you don't have a longing, yearning for it. Then a non-practitioner is going to typically have a certain amount of unwholesome moral conduct, with what we might refer to as wrong speech or wrong action. For those of you guys that learned the Eightfold Path on Monday, you learned what is right speech and right action. And what you're going to find is more and more as you're practicing right speech and right action, other people around you might not be. In fact, I was just in a conversation on Sunday, I think it was. Yeah, it was Sunday or Monday. I was talking, a monk actually came to my house to visit me. And he was actually using profanity during the conversation. He was like using the F word and the A word and different words like this. And I just sat there and I just talked. It didn't affect me. I didn't feel upset. I didn't feel frustrated. But this individual who was a monk, who was actually supposed to be practicing the teachings and said that he had been doing this for 18 years, he was still using profanity. And this isn't something that someone who is practicing these teachings closely would actually be doing. So you're going to be around people who are even, designated as an ordained practitioner, perhaps, who you would think would actually be practicing these teachings. Just because they're an ordained practitioner doesn't mean that they're actually practicing the teachings. They could actually not be practicing the teachings. And if you have an expectation that they will practice the teachings, then your mind will be frustrated and angry. So you need to be sure that you don't react in these situations where people are not using wholesome moral conduct. Because if your mind craves for everybody to treat you a certain way, when they don't treat you that way, you'll be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So when somebody's being bitter, harsh, and hostile to you, oftentimes the best thing to do is just to walk away. If you stand there and argue with them, or you try to tell them like, who are you to treat me like that? And don't treat me like this, and don't treat me like that. You should treat me like this. That's an expectation. That's you putting your expectation on that person. Instead, just realize that their mind is not functioning very well in that moment, and it's best to just walk away. So instead of reacting in situations with bitterness and hostility, it's better to respond. And sometimes your response might be to walk away. That's how you can respond to this situation. Responding to a situation doesn't mean you start teaching them what to do and how to do it and all these kinds of things. Instead, a response can be that you just choose to walk away. You might end up experiencing times where you're quietly frustrated when you're walking away. When you're enlightened, you won't experience that. You won't even have the slightest little ickiness or frustration in your mind. But during the period of time where you're transforming your mind, you might notice that you're frustrated, you're agitated, you're annoyed. And it's better to be quietly frustrated than overtly hostile and angry. Where you're becoming hostile and angry outwardly towards other people, you're just putting hostility and bitterness out, and it's just going to come back to you. If you continue to be bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships, those people are just going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to you right back. So you might notice that when you're walking away, you're frustrated, you're agitated, you're annoyed. It's better to be quietly frustrated and just walk away than to sit there and overtly be angry and argumentative and hostile in this relationship, because you'll never actually eliminate your difficulties and struggles in relationships by being bitter and harsh and hostile and argumentative. It's kind of like if somebody picks up a rubber ball and they throw around the rubber ball. Well, if you pick up the rubber ball and you throw it around, then they're going to pick it up and they're going to throw it around. This ball has this energy. It's going to keep bouncing around. But if you understand that you can't stop this rubber ball from bouncing if you keep picking it up, when somebody picks up the rubber ball of anger and hatred and ill will and they throw it around the room, don't pick it up. Just let it roll to the corner. Let it lose its energy, because then when it loses its energy, it's not going to keep bouncing around in the room any longer, right? But if you become bitter and harsh and hostile right back, you've just got one big argument going on in the relationship. So it's better to be quietly frustrated than overtly hostile and angry. You can choose to move on from relationships while maintaining your loving kindness and compassion for all beings, understanding that any discontentedness that you're experiencing is a result of your own cravings, desires, attachments. So what I typically teach people is I share with you guys that when you're feeling angry and frustrated and irritated, with a lack of wisdom of these teachings, you might actually push people away out of your life. This is called aversion, where you're pushing a person away or you're pushing a situation away. As long as you're doing this, you won't be able to become harmonious within your relationships, because in this situation, the mind is perceiving the problem to be something external, and the mind thinks if I push this person away, then that's going to solve my problem. This is aversion, and this is with what the Buddha refers to as wrong view. That the mind thinks with its wrong view, the painful feelings that you're experiencing is coming from something external, and the way to solve that is to push this person away. That's not going to result in successful, harmonious relationships. But what you can choose to do is move on from a relationship. Like, say there's a certain relationship that has a lot of bitterness and harshness and hostility. You might choose to move on out of that relationship, but you need to maintain right view to understand that any painful feelings you're having in that relationship is coming from your own mind. That choosing to leave this relationship isn't going to solve your anger. It's not going to solve your frustration. It's not going to solve your irritation and annoyance. What's going to solve that is eliminating your craving, desire, attachment. So if you have a certain partner that is doing things a certain way, and you just can't live with the way that they're doing things, and you might choose to leave out of that relationship, okay, leave out of that relationship. You can choose to do that. But if you're angry and frustrated about something that they were doing, that's not going to solve it. You got to get rid of your craving, desire, attachment. Because if you have another partner who does things exactly that way, you're still going to get angry or frustrated. And if it's not about that situation, it's going to be about another situation. So that's why you need to get rid of these expectations and this longing, yearning, and wanting this person to be a certain way. So it is possible to leave out of relationships and choose that this relationship isn't going well, and it's better for me to leave out of it. Because on your journey to enlightenment, you're going to have kind of three different types of relationships. You're going to have some relationships that you have right now that there's bitterness and harshness and hostility. You're not committed to the relationship and you're not interested in really improving it, and there's too much bitterness there anyway, and it's better to just let go of the relationship and move on. And you can do that. You can just let go of the relationship and move on. If you keep holding on to this relationship, you're just going to stay burdened with all that difficulties and struggles. So you can just move on from the relationship. But you still need to do work on your own mind to let go of the cravings, desires, attachments that's producing the discontentedness in this relationship within your own mind. Then there's a second category of relationships. These are like people that you're more committed to. Maybe you do struggle in these relationships. Maybe you do have challenges. Like my wife, at one time we struggled and we had challenges. Or like my mom, when I was growing up, I had a lot of difficulties in a relationship with my mom and we struggled. But I was committed to those relationships and I decided to work on my own mind. And then when I worked on my mind, I was able to be better in those relationships with my wife and my mom and so forth. Then there's a third category of relationships. These are brand new people that you've never even met yet. You don't even know their names right now. And if you learn these teachings and you're only ever loving and kind in those relationships will go wonderful for you because you're not putting expectations on people. You're not trying to control people. You're not trying to get them to be any particular way. So these are the three types of relationships and how you kind of clean up your relationships. Is there some relationships you're going to need to let go of and move on from? There's other ones that you're more committed to, maybe like your parents, your siblings, life partner, children, people like that, where you're going to do some work on your mind and then you'll be better in these relationships. And then there's a third category of relationships, brand new people you haven't even met yet. You don't even know their names. You'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships. And that's all that's ever going to come back to you in those relationships. So this is how you can clean up your relationships, but you're going to need to maintain right view, where anytime you're experiencing painful feelings, it's coming from your own mind. It's not coming from that person or this relationship. You're going to need to eliminate any craving, desire, attachment, want, or expectation that all beings need to practice these teachings, that you cannot force someone to practice these teachings. So if you're in relationships with non-practitioners, people who aren't practicing these teachings, if you have a craving for them to practice these teachings, you're going to experience discontentedness. So you can't force people. So like even my son, he's 12 years old. Sometimes people, when they meet him, they ask him like, so do you meditate every day? And he says, no. And they're shocked. They're surprised. They're like, whoa, your dad teaches meditation and you don't meditate every day? No, because I don't force him to do it, right? If he would like to meditate and he would like to learn how to meditate, great. I'm here to teach him and I will help him. But I don't force him to meditate. He's got to make his own decisions in life. He's his own being. So I don't put my expectations on him and I don't control him to do things my way. He knows about meditation. He knows the benefits of it, but he chooses not to meditate. And he's trained his mind quite a bit. So I asked him about a week or two ago, I said, how often do you get discontent? He says he gets discontent like once every 3 months. He has like a little bit of an annoyance in his mind, like once every 3 months. And that's because I helped him with so many other things that he was young when he started learning. He started learning when he was 6 years old. So now his mind wasn't very polluted to begin with because as a child, we don't have as much pollution. So it was really easy for him to get to where he's at today, that he didn't have to do a lot of meditation. So I didn't have to impose on him my expectation that he would meditate. I'm here to help him if he would like to meditate, but it's up to him to choose that. And that's what you would like to do in each one of your relationships. Here in Thailand, we have a phrase, you might have heard it if you've interacted with Thai people. They usually say, up to you. Have you guys heard this around Thai people? You'll usually ask them like, hey, would you like to go over here? And they'll say, I don't know, up to you. Right? They usually say, up to you. Like if you get a taxi driver and you say, hey, can you do this or you can do that? Sure, up to you. Right? Thais will usually say this a lot, where it's up to you, right? So if my son would like to meditate, up to you. It's your choice. Whereas if it's up to me, then I'm imposing my expectations on him. So you would like to get to the point where you're completely comfortable. If mom chooses to do this or dad chooses to do that, that's their choice. It's not affecting you. It's their choice of what they choose to do. So if you get rid of any kind of expectation or trying to force or control people to practice these teachings, up to you. It's up to them whether or not they choose to do it or not. It's helpful to train the mind to be comfortable accepting other people's choices and decisions because their decisions aren't going to match what you want or what you expect. What you decide for your life is going to be different than what other people choose for their life. Right? I gave you that example earlier about the movies when I would go to my wife and ask her, hey, do you want to go to the movies? And she'd be like, no, I'm fine. I'm going to stay here. Where in the past I would be angry and frustrated because I really wanted her to come to the movies. Where now it's like, okay, you'd like to stay home? Up to you, right? That's the up to you. Up to you. If you'd like to stay home, up to you, right? So you would like to get to the point where you're comfortable with other people's choices and decisions, that their choices and decisions don't have to match yours, because it's very rare that someone's choices and decisions are going to match your choices and decisions. You need to be comfortable with that. That's just impermanence. The problem isn't that their decisions don't match yours. That's not the problem. The problem is that your mind wants them to have the same decision as you. If you let go of that, you can be quite comfortable in these situations. So here, the problem is not that others are not practicing the teachings, but instead that the mind wants and expects others to practice the teachings. So if someone's practicing the teachings or not, that's their choice, up to you, right? So like when that ordained practitioner came to my house and he was using profanity, up to him. Doesn't affect me, right? I heard the words. Doesn't affect me. I'm not upset. I'm not angry. He's the one that's going around using profanity in certain situations. It's affecting him. It's not affecting me. So you would like to get to the point where you don't have a craving or an expectation for other people to do things the same way as you. That's typically what the mind has in the unenlightened state, that you want other people to do things the same way as you. It's important to understand that you can disagree with other people's intentions, speech, and actions while choosing to remain peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You're not going to agree with other people's choices and decisions. Once again, this ordained practitioner who came, I didn't agree with him that he was using profanity. And then there was other things that he was asking me about. He was asking me about meditation and all these other things. And the way that I was teaching him based on the words of the Buddha was very different than what he had learned before, because he doesn't base his teachings on the original words of the Buddha. So what he was thinking was completely opposite of what the Buddha was teaching. He was talking about rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. The Buddha didn't teach any of those things. But in his mind, what he had been exposed to, he thinks that's what the Buddha actually did. So other people aren't going to do things your way. You're going to disagree with them, but you can maintain your peacefulness and joy, understanding impermanence. That of course this ordained practitioner has a different perspective about the teachings of the Buddha, because they've had different experiences than I have. They haven't studied with the original words of the Buddha. But if I expected them to be able to understand things in the same way as me, I would be frustrated and agitated. So instead, we just had an open conversation where he was asking me a bunch of questions about the teachings, and then I was sharing with him what I know from the teachings of the Buddha. And more frequently than not, he was like, wow, that's completely different than what I've learned before, right? So you're going to have those situations, not just with the teachings of the Buddha, but with other things in your life. When you're at work, people are going to be in a meeting. They're going to want to do things one way, and you're going to be interested in doing it another way. This is okay. It's normal. So we can disagree with each other while still being peaceful and joyful. And it's important to understand that you can disagree with other people while still maintaining your loving kindness and compassion, not wanting other people to do things exactly the same way as you. Sometimes we think that we can only respect people if they do things our way. Right? This is unwise. You should be able to respect everybody, no matter what they choose to do. Right? Someone might choose to do things different than you in life. That's okay. That's their choices and decisions, but you can still respect them. Respecting somebody doesn't mean that you agree with everything that they do. It just means that you have respect for them, meaning that you're not going to be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, that you can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to people. So even when people are doing things that you disagree with, you can learn how to be polite and respectful with them. But if you have a craving in your mind for them to be a certain way, you won't be able to do that. So you can practice being loving and kind and compassionate in situations where you disagree with other people. So here's what I usually do at the end of this discussion. This is what I had to share with you, just enough to kind of help you guys understand a few things, is I just open up to you guys that if there's certain struggles or challenges that you're having with people in your life, maybe there's certain things that you're struggling with in your relationship with your parents or your siblings or your coworkers or your life partner, your children, you can ask any of those questions that you like. I'll help you if you're struggling with certain aspects of your relationships. So is there anything that you guys would like to ask here or online? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand if you like.
What about being a pleaser? I mean, you can be loving kindness and being compassionate with people, but how can you avoid to be a pleaser?
you need to know what's wise and what's unwise, because in the situations where you're trying to please people, if they can only be happy when they get what they want, that means when you don't give them what they want, they're going to be angry and frustrated. And now you got to deal with that. So I'll just use this example from this ordained practitioner who just came to visit me recently. When I was talking to him, I could tell that he didn't even understand the Four Noble Truths, which was like the very first teaching of the Buddha, because he was saying that other people make him angry and frustrated. So I could tell that he didn't even understand the Four Noble Truths, the very first teaching of the Buddha. And he said that he'd been doing this for 18 years. He'd been ordained for 12 years, but he'd been meditating for 18. And I said to him, I said, wow, this is really unfortunate that you don't know the very first teaching of the Buddha. I said, a monk without understanding the teachings of the Buddha is like a construction worker who doesn't know how to use a hammer. I said, you're going to have a really challenging time being a monk if you don't understand the teachings of the Buddha. And he started putting his expectations on me. And he said, oh, you got to stop saying that to me. Like, don't tell me that I don't know the teachings. So in this situation, if I was just trying to please him and I was just trying to appease him, then he's not really benefiting from our conversation. But what he needed to hear in that conversation is that, hey, you don't know the teachings yet. But I was doing it in a loving and kind way, but it was hard for him to hear that, particularly from a household practitioner, because typically the ordained practitioners think that they're above us when they're really not. Everybody's equal, right? So for his mind, it was a little bit challenging to hear that here's a household practitioner telling him that, hey, you don't really know the teachings so well. So if you just try to appease people and please them, then that means you're not necessarily benefiting them. You need to not have attachment to them and wanting them to always be happy, because if you have a craving for this person to always be happy, then you will try to appease them. So you would like to, not do things where you're being disgruntled and angry and frustrated, irritated, but sometimes you need to have a challenging conversation with somebody, and that's okay. And that'll actually strengthen relationships oftentimes. As me and my wife were practicing these teachings, there were times where I had to sit down with her and have a really nice talk with her and help her to understand certain aspects of the teachings. And I would just be very open and very honest with her. And she'd come to appreciate that, because rather than me just trying to appease her, I was sharing things with her that was sometimes very difficult. So you need to eliminate your attachment to this person always being happy, and realizing that sometimes you're going to need to have challenging conversations, and that's okay. And there can be growth in that for you and for that person too. If you have specifics that you would like to ask, we can talk about that.
It's not about not having difficult conversations. It's more about, agreeing with people when maybe I have a different way to see things, or and smile too much.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to explain, but as being a woman, sometimes it's like you are taught that way. Like you have to be a little bit like that.
Yeah, this is where you need to understand that disagreeing with someone isn't disrespectful. Sometimes we're taught that disagreeing is disrespectful, but that's not the case. When we disagree, it just means we have two different points of view. And of course we have two different points of view because we've all had different experiences in life. It's not possible for all of us to have the same point of view. So if somebody's sharing a certain opinion or view and you disagree with that, first, you shouldn't feel like you're obligated to tell them that you disagree with their opinion or view, because oftentimes it just doesn't even make sense to even discuss it, because this person isn't interested in learning anything from you, and they're just going to get angry anyway, because in their mind they crave for everybody to agree with them. So oftentimes it's better to just change the subject and move on. But if this is somebody who is close to you, somebody who is interested in maybe potentially hearing your point of view, you can say things like, are you interested in my advice? Or would you like to hear my thoughts on that? Or are you open to another opinion about that? And then at that point, they're going to say either yes or no. And if they say yes, then you can share openly and they're open to your advice. If they say, no, I'm not interested, you need to be comfortable with that, because not in every situation they're going to say yes. because of impermanence, sometimes they're going to say no. And if you don't have a craving to share your opinion, when they say no, you'll be completely fine with that, right? And then sometimes they'll say, yes, I am interested in your point of view. You'll start sharing it, and within like 30 seconds, their ego will come up and they'll start getting angry and frustrated. And you need to be prepared for that too, and be willing to just back out of the conversation and be like, hey, no worries, no foul. By the way, what are you doing tomorrow? Do you have plans for tomorrow? Right? Just change the subject to something else. That's typically the best way. So in these kinds of situations, you can share your opinions and views, but oftentimes it's better if someone's not open to it, it's just keep it to yourself. You don't need to go out there and tell everybody, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be so wise. You're going to have wisdom about this world that other people don't have. If you share your opinion with every single person that you interact with, you're going to be in endless conversations, because there's so many people that misunderstand things in the world. So you're going to need to be comfortable with being in situations where you just don't share what it is that you have to share, unless they ask for it. Because now when they ask for your information and your input, you know that you're actually sharing it with someone who's going to do something with it. Because one of the things that an enlightened being is they're very productive and very successful in the world. Success meaning they have harmonious relationships. Productive meaning they're able to accomplish a lot of things in their day-to-day life. Not because they're busy and active, or not because they're busy, but because they're active and they're able to make wise decisions. So if you're sharing things with people who really aren't interested in your opinions and views, it's wasting your time. So you would like to be sure that you're targeted and only sharing things with people who are actually interested in what you have to say. And as you become more and more wise, you're going to have so many things that are different opinions than everybody else. And if you shared your opinion with everybody, you're going to just essentially be wasting your time. So you'd like to really make sure that the person you share with is open to what you're sharing. And then be sure that as their ego might arise, that you're willing to back out of the conversation, because you're going to have to do that from time to time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And what about new people that come to your life and you don't know them, but they have expectations, so they want something from you? Is it fine to just love and say goodbye? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to, try to keep them in your life if you see that they are not aligned with this person that you are becoming, that is wiser and is more peaceful.
Yeah, you don't have to have a relationship with every single person. You can love someone from afar, right? Like, even if you've been in a relationship and you decide to move on, you can still love that person. So every ex-girlfriend that I've ever had, I still love them. Not interested in being in a close relationship with them, but I still love them, meaning I have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, right? That's what it means to love. I have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, right? So you can love somebody from afar, and that's okay. You don't have to be involved with them in order to love them. You can choose to move on from the relationship and still maintain your love, meaning you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have a question, sir?
Yeah, in relation to what you were talking about, aversion,
Mm-hmm.
I suffer from that. What tips do you have, or methods, like, is it to kind of get past that? I've been diagnosed with, back home, been diagnosed with PTSD, OCD,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if it's the condition or it's me, or is it, but since I've been here, since I've, detached from society, sort of like working, I find like I'm ready to kind of go to another step,
Mm-hmm.
or I kind of see like a bit of like calmness there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I just actually did a talk on Sunday about mental health, because oftentimes people are being misled to think that there's some defect in their brain, and that's why they're experiencing the certain symptoms that they are. So like PTSD, what people are calling PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, all this is that you've had some experiences in the past that your mind is clinging to, and you're forming feelings now based on those experiences from the past. But you can choose to let that stuff go and not form feelings now based on things that happened in the past, but your mind doesn't know how to do that because it hasn't been trained. So there's nothing defective about your brain. It's just that your mind is clinging to experiences from the past and forming feelings today based on those things. But you can choose to train your mind not to do that. And then people that are diagnosed with OCD, all this is a craving for permanence, wanting things to be a certain way, like, brushing. I don't know if you go to this far, like brushing the fabrics of the carpet to be all one particular way, or in your house wanting everything to be a particular way, a certain way. This is just craving for permanence and wanting everything to be a certain way permanently. And that's just what every unenlightened mind is doing. So again, it's not that there's a defect in your mind or anything like this. And now when things are going your way, you feel good. But when things aren't the way you want them to be, that's where you're maybe pushing people away because they're not doing things your way and wanting things to be your way. So what I was going to do is go backwards here. This is like the whole slide deck from this particular class that course that I'm teaching. This is what you really need to learn. It's what I taught on Monday, but it's been recorded many times. It's the core central teaching of the Buddha. When you train your mind in each one of these factors, when you understand what they are, and then you actually train your mind this way on a regular, ongoing basis, this is what will transform your mind. So there's nothing I can say in 3 minutes or 5 minutes that's going to fix that part of your life about having aversion. But what I can share with you is that if you get this book, which is free, you can download it from our website for free. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon. If you start reading this first book and you start taking the classes and courses and retreats, particularly to learn this Eightfold Path, that's what's going to transform your mind. It's going to be a certain amount of meditation that you'll be doing regularly, but then there's other things that you need to be doing too, so that you need to be able to see with your mindfulness, for example, that I don't know how your symptoms of what people call OCD are presenting, but let's just say in your kitchen, if you want things to be a certain way, you want the knives here, you want the towels here, you want the soap here. If you see that it's not that way, and you have this craving to put it back to where it's supposed to, where you think it's supposed to be, you've got to see that that's a craving and that you need to cut that off and let that go. You'd be like, no, the soap is fine over there. It doesn't have to be moved over here. That's okay. And I can be comfortable with that. That's just impermanence. So you just need to be actively training your mind with things like meditation, but then in your day-to-day life where you see these cravings coming up and wanting things to be a certain way, you need to train your mind to cut it off and let it go. Cut it off and let it go. Or say like you're having a certain emotion starting to rise up because of what people refer to as PTSD of some experience that you've had in the past. You're starting to see that your mind's starting to form emotions based on that. You can cut that off and let it go. You're not suppressing it, but what you're doing is you're training your mind not to form that feeling. But you need to know how to do it because that's what this whole path is going to teach you. I can kind of give you a little pieces of it right here, but to really understand it, you're going to need to know this. And it's in the book. We have an audio book for it. We have classes, courses, videos, podcasts, things like this where you can learn this teaching. And it's all for free. You can even have personal guidance, whether you're here in Thailand or you go back to your home country. You can schedule appointments online, and I will help you personally to understand how to practice this so that you can transform your mind. Because your mind doesn't have to experience these, because when you're in relationships, it's only a matter of time before somebody does something opposite of how you want them to do it. And if every single time you push them away, you're going to find that you probably feel pretty lonely because you don't have very many relationships that are long-term and sustaining. So when you train your mind not to do this, you'll be able to have lasting, fulfilling relationships. So it really starts with this teaching that you're going to need to learn and develop. Mm-hmm. Yep. And those are all the different ways that you can get access to it. Okay. Any other things you guys would like to talk about here on this topic?
I have some problems with dealing with my cats.
Mm-hmm.
I really love my cat, but she always scratch me or bite me. So I don't know. Sometimes I will feel frustrated or stressful, and I will think, "Oh, I don't want you." But after that, I will feel regretful and mad about myself.
Yeah.
So I don't know the situation will change if the others are animals instead of human beings.
Yeah, animals are definitely non-practitioners. they can't practice these teachings closely because their consciousness can't develop and evolve to the same level as a human being. This is one of the great reasons of being a human being, is you can actually develop your consciousness far beyond what an animal can do. So in these situations, animals are not going to be able to practice these teachings. And this is one of the challenges of choosing to have an animal in your life, is that they're going to sometimes do things completely opposite of what you would prefer. And this is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, at this point in my life, I wouldn't own an animal. I wouldn't have an animal, because each being needs to be out there in the world making their own free decisions. Like, I wouldn't suggest that you go turn your cat loose and put her out into the world, or him out into the world. But choosing to have an animal in your home means that you're now taking responsibility for this being's life. And now they are going to do things in ways, because their mind is lacking wisdom. They're going to do things like biting and scratching and damaging furniture and things like this, peeing on the floor, pooping on the floor, because their consciousness isn't as evolved as a human being. So oftentimes we are attached, we're craving to have another being in our life, and we kind of keep this pet for our own desires, our own selfish desires. But this is the problem that you experience because of that. And now you have potentially getting bit or scratched. You might have extra expenses that you wouldn't otherwise have, like medical expenses or food and things like this. So you'll just need to decide whether this is something you would like to do ongoing. You probably will take care of this one until, it's end of life. But continuing to have animals means that you're going to continue to experience these kinds of things. And you need to, if you're going to have an animal, to be able to understand that they don't have the level of consciousness as a human being, and they never will. They're not going to function in the same way as a human being. And even human beings have difficulties as well, functioning in certain ways when the mind's in the unenlightened state. So these are going to be challenges that you experience. And that's the result of the decision to have an animal in your life and live so closely with it. This is what we call Gotama, the results of your decisions. When you make decisions wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience either wholesome results or wholesome Gotama, or unwholesome results or unwholesome Gotama, or some people call it karma. You might have heard that word. This word karma or Gotama, it doesn't mean anything mystical or magical. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not about guilt or shame or who's to blame or who's at fault. It's just the results of your decisions. There are certain decisions that we all make in life, and when you make decisions wisely, you will experience wholesome Gotama or wholesome results. And when you make decisions unwisely, you'll experience unwholesome Gotama or unwholesome results. And because of the unwise decision to have this other being, where now you're keeping it for your own selfish desires, you're going to, and not saying that you're selfish, but just saying this is what the mind does, is the mind has craving, that it wants this thing to be mine. And now because of that, you're experiencing the biting and the scratching and this kind of thing. And this is going to produce unwholesome Gotama, because the mind is functioning through craving, desire, attachment. And now whenever you make a decision through craving, desire, attachment, there's going to be unwholesome results because of it. And this is one of the reasons why we all experienced COVID several years ago, that animals should be off in the animal world, living in their world, and we should have our world, human world. But when we have this close contact between humans and animals, this is where diseases from the animal realm come into the human realm. This is what happened with COVID, where now we have vaccines, and some people take the vaccines in order to eliminate the COVID, but it hasn't solved the core problem, which is the close contact with human beings and animals. This is why we have HIV, AIDS. This is why we have swine flu, bird flu, mad cow disease, COVID. There's a whole host of other diseases and viruses in the animal world that if we keep having close contact with animals, it's going to make its way into the human world. And these are choices that we're making as human beings, not realizing that it's unwise to have such close contact with animals. Even though I grew up with animals my whole life and I always enjoy being around animals, at this point in my life, I can see the cause and effect relationship that it produces unwholesome results when we're around animals to this level of degree. I could tell you story after story of how people in my life have been injured and have bodily injuries now that are long-term and sustaining because of being around animals for so much. So this is just a result of decisions. But whether you choose to have animals or not, it's a choice for you to make. Nobody's going to try to convince you or force you to do things differently. But just understand that the results you are experiencing are from the decisions that you're making, and then you'll need to decide whether or not you would like to continue to make those kinds of decisions or change the way that you do things so that you don't have to keep experiencing being bit and scratched and things like this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Yeah, Hugo.
Yeah, my question is related to a feeling of not belonging when I go out with friends and the subjects come up and I answer in a particular way according to the training that I had in India, the training that I'm having here. The approach of not hurting anybody, etc., and that owns me a motto of Swami Hugo. Then I sense that I sense that I am causing them discontent by being who I am. Then that's a struggle that I face. And when I say certain things, even the partner that I got now, that it is just developing, he's not really a partner yet. She said, "Oh, you're changing." Well, we are all changing, but I just wonder in your comments how to deal with that.
Yeah, so it's important to make sure you have clear in your mind that you're not causing other people to be discontent. If somebody's discontent because you're changing, that's because of their mind craving permanence, right? You're going to change. Everybody's going to change. So if they become discontent because you're now doing things in a different way than you did before, that's them causing it themselves. And typically when someone first gets on this path, they have certain relationships that they have of people around them that oftentimes there's attachment. There's certain wants and expectations in those relationships. And as they start moving into these teachings closer and closer, oftentimes their relationships change and they end up spending time with other people aside from the ones that they currently have. They might maintain some of those relationships, but oftentimes some of those relationships people let go of because these people want you to be a certain way and they're just holding on to you to be a certain way. So it's not uncommon for people to create new relationships with other people in the world that don't have those same expectations of you. Because in the past, when you were making decisions about certain friends and people, a life partner, things like this, you were making that with maybe a lack of wisdom of these teachings. And now maybe as you're starting to learn these teachings more and more, you might change the types of people that you choose to spend time around. So don't be surprised if you choose to either change relationships or things start shifting and changing with your relationships. But it's important to make sure you know that any discontentedness that someone's experiencing isn't coming from you. And if they're upset that you're changing, that's their own mind that's causing that. It's not your mind. It's just that they're uncomfortable with impermanence. Because as I usually say, one way to talk about this is that the mind craves permanence. Another way to say it is that the mind does not like impermanence. The mind doesn't like change. When people start changing, people's minds just don't like that. And that's not that you've done anything wrong, so to speak, because every single person is changing, like you said. It's just that this person's mind isn't comfortable with change. So if you're going to have a successful relationship with a life partner, you're going to hear me talk about that when we get to that topic. I think it's tomorrow when I talk about choosing friends and a life partner. I'm going to give you some guidance on that because this course is about harmony in relationships. You're going to hear one of the things that I share with you is having people that practice these teachings you will have a much better relationship. While it's possible to have relationships with people who don't practice these teachings, that's what this talk is about. In terms of a life partnership, it's best if you have a partner who is practicing these teachings, because you guys are going to be coming from two completely different frame of reference in your mind. It's almost like playing music from two different sheets of music. If you're playing music with one sheet of music and they're playing music with another sheet of music, this music's not going to sound beautiful. So if you are considering this person to be a long-term partner, you might suggest to them to read the book. You might suggest to them to watch a couple of videos, because as they're learning a little bit about these teachings and you're learning about these teachings, you guys will have much better, more fulfilling relationship. Where if they're not learning these teachings, it's going to be a real struggle. But you need to be able to do it in a way that you don't put your expectation on the person or try to force them or control them. You need to just suggest it. And then it's up to them whether or not they choose to go forward or not. Up to you.
It's interesting that I wrote down here something from the previous slides. I said it's better to be quietly frustrated and overtly hostile and angry. Then I share some of the topics with my, this friend that I got, and she said, I hope that this is not changing you, and I hope that we can watch the football and have a wine when you come back. I don't drink. And the football, yeah, it's kind of like, well, if you'd like to drink wine, that's up to you. I'm not going to choose to drink wine, but if you choose to do it, that's your choice. And then if you enjoy watching football, watch football, right? So it's not about everybody making the same exact choices. This individual sounds like she has a craving to drink wine with you. It sounds like she has a craving to watch football with you. And she's going to need to learn to let that go if she's going to live harmoniously with you. Otherwise, if she maintains this craving, then she's going to be discontent, but you're not causing that. So you just be upfront and open with this person. Say, hey, if you'd like to drink wine, that's completely up to you. That's your choice. I'm not going to drink any wine, but it's up to you if you'd like to drink that wine. And then if you're in that environment where she's trying to force you and pressure you to drink wine, then maybe you need to reconsider about whether or not to have this person as a friend. Yeah, I wonder if a glass of wine and watching the football for half an hour is not going to be beneficial as far as letting go.
You can watch football. There's no harm in watching football. You're not causing any harm there.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to drive is that it's better than being quietly frustrated and over hostile and angry. And to me, being quietly frustrated is having a glass of wine and watching the football. And rather than arguing the point, I'm making a little bit of a thorn in the relationship that, for half an hour out of 24 hours, for example, or a week or a month or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I wouldn't drink wine no matter what. If somebody's putting the expectation on me that they expect me to drink wine just because they're drinking wine, that's not a healthy relationship, right? So that individual needs to be able to understand that. So that's where you say, hey, if you'd like to drink wine, up to you. And if they're like, come on, you got to drink wine. Like, no, I'm fine. And they just keep at it. Say, okay, hey, I tell you what, I'm going to leave. I'll see you another time. Bye-bye. And just leave, right? Just walk away.
But isn't that give and take, though? For example, I mean, with this lady that I'm seeing, often enough I suggest a vegetarian restaurant. She said, oh, yeah, okay, I'm not a vegetarian, but I'll go with you. Then it's just a give and take in a relationship that perhaps is the point that I'm trying to drive.
Yeah, I mean, give and take in this kind of situation where you think that, okay, just because she's drinking wine, I need to drink wine to make her happy. That's back to what we were talking about here, is like just to appease somebody. And if you do that, now it's not just the wine. It's like, hey, I want you to do this thing too. And I want you to do that thing. And I want you to do this and this. And next thing you know, you're living this life of doing things that this person wants you to do, but you're not really interested in doing those kinds of things. And if you're not interested in doing those kinds of things, then don't do do it, right? It doesn't make sense to do things that you're just not interested in doing. So at this point in my life, like sometimes my wife in the past, she would invite me to a yoga class, right? And I went to a few yoga classes here and there, but I'm not really into yoga. I just don't do it. But I would go every once in a while just to see what it was like. But hey, our relationship isn't based on us doing yoga together, right? There isn't any one particular activity that if David doesn't do this, I can't have a relationship with him. That's a craving, desire, attachment. That's a want and an expectation. And if you have a relationship like that, it's just going to be one thing after another, after another, after another. If it's not the wine, it's going to be something else, and it's going to be something else. And like I said, next thing you know, you're going to be living a life that you don't really appreciate, you don't really enjoy, because you're doing things that everybody else wants you to do instead of the things that you enjoy. So if she'd like to drink wine and watch football, go drink wine and watch football. She can do that with somebody else. She doesn't have to do it with you. Because sometimes when we get in these relationships, we think that this other person is going to fulfill all of our desires, right? We cast all our goals and expectations of what we want on this other person, and we think this other person is going to fulfill us, and we want this person to do everything with us. Where when you get in these relationships, you need to understand that sometimes you guys are going to do certain things together, but sometimes you're going to do things separately too. So my wife has things that she does on her own. I have things that I do on my own that she doesn't do with me. And then we have some things that we do together. But those are the things that we enjoy doing together. The things that she doesn't enjoy, she doesn't do them with me. And the things that I enjoy, or the things that she enjoys, I don't do them with her. And that's okay. But if you're in a relationship where you think everything I enjoy, she has to enjoy too, or everything that I enjoy, he has to enjoy too, and we have to do these things together, that's the craving for permanence. And now it's going to sabotage your relationship. So if there's certain things that she does that you're not interested in doing, you just let her know that, like, hey, I'm not interested in doing that, but if you would like to do it, hey, have a good time. I'm going to be over here doing this. And that's okay. And if she loves you unconditionally, she'll be completely fine with that. She'll say, okay, go have your fun. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do this. Great. We'll see each other another time. Enjoy.
Okay.
That's a healthy relationship where you're not tugging and pulling at each other to do things my way.
Okay.
Yeah. You guys understanding this? Yeah. Because this is very opposite of what you're used to, right? You're not used to living life this way. And that's why you have certain challenges and struggles in your relationships, because we tug and pull at each other, wanting people to do things our way. Right? Okay. Let me see if we have anything online here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online. Okay, so now it's lunchtime. It's 20 minutes after 12. When we come back, I'm going to teach you this topic of practicing non-attachment, eliminating attachment to those people who are closest to you. Because in a situation where you have attachment, you'll want to do those things. You'll do things that you really don't want to do just because you're attachment, because you don't want to see your girlfriend be angry. So you might do these things just because you don't want her to be angry. And this isn't going to help you in your relationships. You're going to need to learn how to eliminate your attachments. And the attachments to the people who are closest to you, like your parents, your siblings, your children, your life partners, things like this, those are the hardest attachments to get rid of. So there's certain techniques that you can go in and actually eliminate these attachments to the people who are closest to you. So I'm going to teach you guys that after lunch. So now being 20 minutes after 12, if you guys would like to take an hour and a half lunch break, let's see, that'll bring us back at, what will that be? 1:50, I guess. Yeah, about 1:50. So we'll just call it 2 o'clock. Why don't we just call it 2 o'clock? So if you guys would like to come back at 2 o'clock, I'll pick it up then, where I'm going to be doing meditation with you to start, and then we'll talk about this topic. Okay, so enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you guys perhaps afterwards. Okay, take care. All right.